Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of Compassion and Courage Conversations in Healthcare. I'm your host, Marcus Engel, and this is the podcast where we teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience. I am so excited today to welcome my new friend, Susan Ryan, to the program. Susan, thank you so much for joining me on Compassion and Courage.
Oh, Marcus, I consider it the pleasure all mine for sure. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad to. I was recently on your podcast and we had a great conversation, and I thought, well, let's just turn this around and introduce you and your work to my audience too. So thank you for being with me today. We should say that you are a nurse first and foremost,
That's
and
right.
you are the CEO of the Center for Innovation, correct?
That is correct.
Tell me a little bit more about your position and what the Center for Innovation does in fundamentally trying to improve elder care in America and around the world. That's a pretty big, ambitious goal, and I like
Yes,
big, ambitious goals.
you certainly do. So here's the story. We are really about trying to radically change the paradigm of how we grow old in America. And as you said, globally, really. Our mission is to be the catalyst for person-directed living and empowered cultures in the community of one's choice. So what that really means is that we want each individual as they grow older to be able to live life with meaning, with purpose, to be able to direct their lives and kind of what they do, how they do it, and to do it in an empowered culture. So that means those that support them. That's where we're talking about that inextricable link between those that are working there to support those care partners, to support those that are living in these communities. So it really is that reciprocity and that real opportunity to be engaged in those meaningful relationships that really engender people to live, grow, and thrive, no matter if you're the care partner or the care recipient.
Good stuff. And so I'm thinking of both macro and micro level things here. And on the macro level, we're trying to do this because obviously in America, we have an aging population. The silver tsunami, as we say, is coming. And then on the micro level, as you said, person facing.
Correct.
Person facing. So these are the relationships that you're building over time with patients, clients, residents, etc. What is different about what you do and who you do it for than, say, what most people might think of as a typical environment for aging folks?
You know, it's really interesting. I think most people have a pretty good idea of what a nursing home is. And overwhelmingly, people say, I'd rather die than move in there. So that tells you that those environments are not those opportunities to live life with meaning and purpose. And so we are really out to deinstitutionalize the paradigm, that institutional mindset, those beliefs, those systems that really are very routine, that really don't intrinsically value the worth of that individual, certainly are not there to meaningfully hear their voice and how that person wants to direct his or her life. And from the staff side of things, that care partner side, equally, I think we have diminished the value of those that are there to support the elders or residents in our case. And I think oftentimes they are very routinized, that they are somewhat institutionalized, very task focused and not person focused, and really out to check the box and to do what's on their list to do, as opposed to really be able to engage more meaningfully in knowing who the person is and what they might be able to do to better understand the individual and how to really participate and support that person in their growth, recovery, if it's rehab or whatever the case might be.
How do you teach for that?
It's
I
a
guess
very
that's
good
the
question.
training question that
Yeah,
every organization in America has. We know what the end goal is, but how do we teach for
exactly.
it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a real focus of our organization, and we use a construct we call beliefs, behaviors, and systems. Beliefs is where we really are addressing the mindsets that need to shift from that institutional approach and the way, nursing homes were modeled after hospitals. And certainly, Marcus, as I said to you before we hit record, I've just listened to two of your Audible books and so learned from that. And as a nurse, I have spent time in a hospital before and recognizing the powerful role that nurses play. And it's not to be dismissive of what hospitals can do to be more person-centered, patient-centered focused, but certainly in nursing homes where they have been modeled after hospitals where people are in, out, and that relational component isn't always as valued. It's very much task at the test, the blood work, whatever it might be. Let's get that done. But here we are, this is a person's home. And so, how do we, from a mindset, shift that institutional paradigm into one that really embodies the idea that these are people that will be living in a home? So, that's beliefs. And then we can talk about our behaviors. So, it's not just the task, but now that we've shifted our thinking, our mindset, then how will we show up in a new way of caring? What are those behaviors that we would expect to see? And last but not least, what are the systems, the processes, those procedures, those things that we might need to shift to be able to allow that new way of caring, to allow those relationships to form and nurture? And it may get kind of messy. It may not be just exactly perfect and, checking all the boxes that help us feel more comfortable sometimes. But it's the way we really value people. It's the way we are able to live and grow. You ask how we teach it. That's the construct. I think we spend a lot of time in our interview process and really thinking about, who's the right person to be able to work in this environment. I do believe that everybody can learn some of these skills, but I think part of our mindset shift is recognizing these just aren't the quote unquote soft skills, but they're the essential skills. They are really what we are looking for when we are aiming to hire somebody or bring somebody on to the team.
I've often heard nurses in academic environments say we could teach a monkey skills, right? We can teach it. We could teach a robot how to do skills, but it's that
Right.
human interaction, really recognizing those patients or clients or residents as a human being. Do you have any examples like how this is being done in the real world, like with case studies, or you have any cases where you can say that this person was in a different environment and then they came here and thrived? And I'm sure you have all kinds of stories like
Oh,
that.
we absolutely do. In fact, it's interesting. I remember when I first learned of the greenhouse model, which is kind of our signature innovation, that is building small homes, taking those traditional long-term care nursing homes and creating small homes where 10 or 12 people would live in a private room. So you can imagine having walked into a traditional nursing home and what you'd see, and then going into this home that is a real home. It looks like a home, smells like a home. You'll see the kitchen, the open hearth, and that sort of thing. So just the visual cueing, when you take somebody from a traditional building and you place them there, it is amazing what happens. So when I first heard of this in 2005, the greenhouse homes opened their first homes in 2003. I got a video that an architect said, I think you might be interested in this. She showed it to me, and as a nurse who also did home care, I saw this as, oh my gosh, this is home care and long-term care coming together beautifully. And it really is enabling those that need skilled care, long-term care, to be able to have it in a real home. So for me, I looked at that, and there was a story in the video, a woman who had needed help feeding herself, a woman who was living with some significant cognitive impairment, a woman who was actually, she had severe macular degeneration, wasn't able to see well. She was wheeled into her greenhouse home, and they wheeled her up to the table. And she immediately, somebody put a fork in her hand. She began to feed herself. And after the dinner, she began to sing a song. And she sang clearly, as could be, Amazing Grace. And it was like a miracle. I mean, they were talking about the miracles that happen when you open a greenhouse home. People that had not been able, or they were transferred by wheelchair into the dining room for their meals. When they got to their greenhouse home, they were able to walk to the dining room table, which was obviously a lot closer, but they were able to ditch the walkers, ditch the wheelchairs, because they saw that this is home and I can go there. I don't need somebody to take me the long distance down the hallway. I think the other thing that is so exciting is access to outside, which is a real signature part of a greenhouse home. And when I saw the first greenhouse homes in Tupelo, Mississippi in 2005, I was blown away by the raised garden beds and the opportunity for the elders that were out there they had their hands in the garden and they were just having a great time as they were feeling that sense of purpose and really the connection to who they had been as somebody who had been a gardener, who had been able to do these things, but deprived of those things that were meaningful to him or her once they got into a nursing home. But in a greenhouse home, they were able to do that.
That's good stuff right there. I mean, I think we know that there's several studies, probably a lot of studies, on how connecting our physical bodies to the earth uh,
Exactly.
helps re-engage our senses and grounds us and uh, literally grounds us to the ground.
Exactly. Literally.
Yeah, literally. So I that's wonderful stuff. Have you always worked in long term care?
I haven't. I think early in my career, I started right out of college with a degree, a bachelor's degree in nursing. I started in working with elders. It was kind of a radical thought that some physician had in Pennsylvania and asked me if I'd come join him in his radical thought. I did that for a year, and then I would later join long-term care. I did a stint when I was raising children in the hospital, just because the shift work there was kind of conducive to my life at that time. But I went back into long-term care because I did home care, but then I went back into long-term care just believing we had a lot of work to really reform those environments and to do something more meaningful. But I kind of owe my long-term care propensity really to my grandfather. I'm one of 40 grandchildren, if you can imagine.
40
And 40
grandchildren.
yes, I
Goodness,
know.
wow.
Yeah. My dad was one of 11. And so it was a big family, but I felt I had this special relationship with my grandfather. I just thought I knew him, he knew me. At one point in my life, I did a video of him to really get his life story. I was just fascinated. His wife would die when his youngest child was 18 months old. And I was fascinated at his resilience and what he did to keep his family going and to really be that patriarch of the family and to instill such beautiful family values and really kept everybody together. So I think I had such reverence for elders, certainly my grandfather being the role model for me. And I just kind of saw elders as those people with fascinating stories and really wanted to make sure that we knew who they were and knew those stories and were able to ensure that even as physical and mental health might be declining, we would be able to certainly support them, even so to live meaningfully and purposefully.
We all have to have some kind of meaning and purpose, or else life has no meaning, right? And I love that you're giving that to people who may have even thought that their life was over, Even though your
Exactly.
heart's still beating, you feel like I am destined to look at only these four walls the rest of my life. And you're getting people back into life. It's a beautiful thing.
It really is. And, even I think there are so many societal stereotypes and perceptions, especially as we grow older. There's ageism, it's rampant. And I would say that as it pertains to cognitive impairment, and when somebody is, especially if they receive a diagnosis of some form of dementia, they are really truly seen as diminished or less than. They can't contribute meaningfully. And we don't focus on the retained abilities or their personhood and that opportunity to really understand and know who that person is at the core of their being. It's amazing to me how many artists I have seen. They weren't necessarily an artist even in their previous life, but somehow, when given those opportunities to learn, to grow, those living with cognitive impairment are able to do some amazing things. We mentioned gardening earlier. And I think to see something else grow, to contribute and make something else grow, it's just amazing to me to see kind of where they feel purposeful. And as the garden grew and they were able to harvest some of the foods from the garden and have them, it's just amazing. Even cooking, these latent, these women, it's predominantly women, I would say. There aren't many men that I've seen in greenhouse kitchens. But I would say that there are so many women that, where they haven't been able to bake a cake for years, they're able to, in this open kitchen with a greenhouse, they're able to support and to help contribute to making the cake that they're going to have at their ice cream social with cake. And it's just fun to watch that latent growth or that opportunity to still contribute to the normal activities in one's day.
There's studies that say that we are the happiest when we are creating, and creating food out of the ground, or baking a cake, or artistry like you're talking about. That's giving people moments of joy in their life, and that's not something we often think of in elder care, right? Beautiful
Not at all.
stuff. Yeah.
And it's not that expensive, to
Mm.
make these things happen. Joy doesn't cost a lot of money. And I think it really, when I think about what makes joy is when you deeply know who somebody is and what is meaningful to them and what might bring them joy. But, I think some of those things, many of our greenhouse homes have incorporated pets into the environment. And I could tell you story after story about what the joy of feeding a dog in a greenhouse home, or just having the dog come up and they can pet that dog, and just to see the smiles emanating from the elders' faces. Another thing that we do in many of our greenhouse homes, it's the joy of welcoming children, or the staff will. There was this one story I'll tell you. We had a greenhouse home in Arkansas, and one of the staff, the care partners, had a baby, and so she brought the baby by the house to show the elders in the greenhouse home. And this one particular elder, who again living with cognitive impairment, who did not speak very articulately due to the advanced dementia, but when she saw the baby, she talked as plainly and as clearly as you or I are talking. And she said, "Give me that baby." And then she sang a song, Rockabye Baby,
Mhm.
to the little one that she cradled in her arms. And she knew exactly what she was doing. She knew how to hold it. She knew to, cradle it and to kind of wrap the blanket around his feet. And just watching her engage in the joy that flowed from her, but the joy that flowed to all of us as we just watched that moment, that was just that human to human connection. And that woman just remembering, likely, when she held her little ones or her grandchildren, And it was just, for me, it helped me to see her as any grandmother that would be loving and cradling her grandchild, not so and so who's living with dementia. And so we saw the person and not the diagnosis. We saw her abilities and not her disability.
Beautiful, beautiful. I want to ask you a question that I ask all of my pre-meds. In fact, at the beginning of the semester, their first writing assignment is based on the story of Jennifer and I'm here in the hospital. And I ask them to share a story about a time that someone was there for them or that they were there for another person. And I ask that same question to you. Can you describe a time that you were there for someone or that someone was there for you?
So, Marcus, if I were to write a book, in my book, I would have a chapter called For the Love of Katie. And I was a director of nursing at a nursing home. And Katie was, well, this was a time when restraints were best practices, that if somebody had cognitive impairment and that they were at risk for elopement or leaving the building without permission, we would restrain them. So it was one day that I walked down the hallways and I noticed that Katie had been restrained and that she was banging on the chair that held her from movement. And I said, "What's going on?" to the nurses at the station. They said, "Oh, she's been trying to escape all day long." So I kind of knelt down, and Katie was somebody with advanced dementia. She was pretty spry. She could walk here, there, and everywhere, and that was the problem as they saw it. And so I kind of knelt down and I put Katie's hands in my hands and I looked at her and I said, "Katie." And she looked at me and connected in the most beautiful way. And I said, "Would you like to go for a walk?" And as clear can be, she said, "I'd like that." And so I released her from her prison and I put my arm around her waist, and such a frail, tiny little woman. And I could tell that the times that she had been restrained, that her mobility wasn't as good as it was when she had been admitted. And I put my arm around her and we had a meaningful conversation. And for those moments, I felt that Katie felt liberated, that Katie felt joy, that Katie felt loved. And for me, it was that call to action moment. The staff, they were doing what they knew to be best practice at the time. And
Protocol.
that was, yes, exactly. Keep her safe. Don't let her escape because something bad will happen. But what we had done is deprive her of her personhood, number one, and to deprive her of a normal activity and joy. If I were restrained, if you were restrained, we would all feel that desire to escape and to do something. And I thought, I've got to do something different. I've got to make a difference. I'm not sure how to fix a system that is severely broken, but I'm going to give my career, the rest of my career, to trying to make a difference. And for Katie, I made a difference that day, and I would try to do it as often as I could. I would later go into home care. That's when I tried to keep people out of nursing homes, and then ultimately would go back into nursing homes to reform them. And that's where I've been ever since. And I mean, I really attribute that meaningful encounter with Katie, where for those moments I was able to compassionately deliver something that brought her joy. But I knew that wasn't enough. It was like that starfish on the beach, where I made a difference for that one. I did in that moment, but I knew that I had to do more.
And you are again that macro level. It's a very very great thing to witness.
It's the joy of my life. It's really the pinnacle of my career. And as we opened greenhouse homes in Australia, and I guess 2 years ago now, I thought, wow, this is a global thing now that we've opened homes in Canada. And so it really is exciting when we think about, as you alluded to, you called it the silver tsunami. I mean, the world is aging. It's not just an American US thing, but it truly is around the globe. And as we really think about what that means and what we would want for ourselves and our shared humanity, we really have to keep rolling up our sleeves, working together. I have so loved the opportunity to get to know you and your perspectives, and grateful that you're going to be at our conference so we can learn even more from you.
Yeah. Do you want to share a little bit about your conference and what's going on?
Yes. Yeah, well, to connect the dots with what I'm doing, um, we have joined forces, the Greenhouse Project and the Pioneer Network of Culture Change. We have joined forces under the Center for Innovation, and we hold annual conferences to really bring together change makers, those that, as I was describing to Marcus, our desire to really make a meaningful difference, to really see reformation happen for those that are growing older in America and across the globe. And it's an international conference. We will have people from Australia, the Netherlands. I think I heard somebody's from Belgium. Belgium is coming. Our friends from Canada will come. But it's a wonderful place for people to convene. This year we'll be in St. Louis, Missouri. And 20 years ago, there was a landmark meeting where individual stakeholders to the partnership idea, people from Centers for Medicare, Medicaid Services, QIOs, Quality Improvement Organization, ombudsmen, who are those that are out to really ensure that quality of life is happening in nursing homes, nursing home providers, those that are working in PACE, the Program for All-Inclusive Care for Elders, home and community-based services options. We are all convening in St. Louis, Missouri, and we are going to really roll up our sleeves and mobilize the movement. That's our theme, and we are really getting stakeholder perspective. Marcus is one of those that will be really talking about that patient perspective. And having just read your books, or not read, listened to both of your books, it's you've got a powerful story, but what I really appreciated, especially as a nurse, was the distillation of the lessons you learned and the applications for all of us in healthcare to be able to take those lessons to heart. And you give so many great examples of what that patient experience, your experience was through your hospital journey, and how that informs what we do as nurses and care partners. So I'm looking forward, obviously, to what you will be doing. You are a keynote speaker that will then be followed by a panel of direct care professionals. And so it's kind of the both sides of the stethoscope, as you kind of talk about often in your talks. And so I'm really eager to get your perspective along with their perspective, and how important it is to be able to hear that as we talk about reformation. We've got a host of sessions and other speakers, but really, really excited to welcome you there, and really excited to convene this meeting and create actionable steps that we all can take back to bring some change as an individual, as an organization, and to become part of coalitions for change. And we'll have lots of ways that people can plug into those opportunities.
Where can people go to learn more?
Sure, you can go to our website. We have an aginginnovation.org. That's aging, AGING, innovation, INNOVATION, all one word, lowercase, .org. And then you should be able to get information about the Center for Innovation Conference in St. Louis.
I am really looking forward to doing this with you. As you know, I do a lot of work in hospitals and in pre-hospital stuff with EMS and paramedics and EMTs, but I don't get the opportunity very often to work with long-term care organizations, and I'm looking forward to meeting a whole different group of people, and people who have this same idea that we're going to mobilize this movement and make human-centered care for our elders, as you said. I'm not that far from it, so I want to make sure that that there's good things in place whenever that time comes for me.
You know, Marcus, as you're talking, human-centered care, the emphasis is on human. It's not just for when we grow older, but it's throughout our entire life. You know, whether if I were a peds nurse, a pediatric nurse, or working in geriatrics or anywhere in between. And you've really captured that human to human connection that's so important. And it is looking at our shared humanity and putting aside all the societal stereotypes and stigmas associated with whatever disability or age we happen to be. And I'm excited you're going to have your books there, and you'll do a book signing for us as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, this is really a great conversation today. And as I'm thinking over our conversation, I would like to use our interview today as the post for Nurses Week 2025, because I think you have
Awesome.
so encapsulated what it means to be a caring, perceptive, someone who is sensitive to the needs and the humanity of others. And I think that's really what we're all trying to do in this world, and especially nurses are. They've committed their lives to this work. So thank you for sharing all of this with me.
Well, spoiler alert, we're doing the same thing with yours.
Well, good, good.
Yeah, so
Glad to
your
talk.
episode will go live. I think I can't remember. It's a week from today, actually. So that will be right around Nurses Week. And it was intended to do the same thing, to honor nurses.
Great, great. Love it. So I have one last question for you.
Sure.
And that is this: if you had the world's largest billboard on the world's tallest mountain, what is the message that you would want to broadcast to humanity?
You know, it's probably love matters. And I think it's interesting, for the last couple years, and this year will be the same, we have used compassion as a theme with our keynotes. And I think, you know, whether it's compassion or love, but love matters in the equation, no matter what we're talking about. It's really embracing and seeing our shared humanity. And I think at such a time as this, it's even more important to understand we are all humans after all, and love and respect for one another, it matters more than ever.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good thought, and I think that love matters will fit nicely on a billboard. So
I think
let's
so.
see that out there instead of advertisements for fried chicken stands.
Exactly. Hear to that.
Well, Susan Ryan, thank you so much for being with me on this episode of Compassion and Courage. I really appreciate your insights. Thank you.
My honor, Marcus. Thanks so much for having me.
And we'll look forward to seeing you in August at the conference.
Absolutely. Yes.
Great.
See you in St. Louis.
And listeners, thank you for joining us for this special conversation on compassion and courage, conversations in healthcare. Remember that this is the podcast that teaches compassionate communication, provides perspective, and inspires resilience. If you would like to get in touch for speaking engagements, consulting, etc., please reach out via marcusengel.com. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.